If you think you already know how the story of ice and fire ends, guess again, because the winds of winter are blowing.
Prince Doran raised a hand. His knuckles were as dark as cherries and near as big. Sir Balin is a guest beneath my roof. He has eaten of my bread and salt. I will do him no harm. No, we will travel to the Water Gardens, where he will hear Marcella's story and send a raven to his queen. The girl will ask him to hunt down the man who hurt her. If he's the man I judge, Swan will not be able to refuse. Obara, you will lead him to High Hermitage to beard Darkstar in his den. The time is not yet come for Dorne to openly defy the Iron Throne, so we must needs return Marcella to her mother, but I will not be accompanying her. That task will be yours, Nymeria. The Lannisters will not like it, no more than they liked it when I sent them Oberyn. They dare not refuse. We need a voice in council, an ear at court. Be careful, though. King's Landing is a pit of snakes. Lady Nym smiled. Why, uncle, I love snakes. And what of me? Asked Tyene. Your mother was a septa. Oberyn once told me that she read to you in the cradle from the seven-pointed star. I want you in King's Landing too, but on the other hill. The swords and the stars have been reformed, and this new High Septon is not the puppet that the others were. Try and get close to him. Why not? White suits my coloring. I look so pure. Good, the prince said. Good. He hesitated. If certain things should come to pass, I will send word to each of you. Things can change quickly in the Game of Thrones. I know you will not fail us, cousins. Arianne went to each of them in turn, took their hands, kissed them lightly on the lips. Obara, so fierce, Nymeria, my sister, Tyene, sweetling, I love you all. The son of Dorne goes with you. Unbowed, unbent, unbroken, the sand snakes said together. Unbowed, unbent, unbroken. The words of House Martell. Got them on my shirt here. It's a little bit vintage, this shirt. It's got the little balls and stuff on it. It's a little worn, but, got to represent for House Martell and all of Dorne and all of their tragic glory. So, hey, it's LML. This is Quinn.
Hey,
Quinn
guys.
Ideas.
This opening is so cool. Everyone's being sent off on their missions. It reminds me of the X-Men. He's like Professor X rolling up in his wheelchair, man. Like, everyone, you're going here to, like, check out Magneto, and you go over here and, like, see what Mystique is up to. It's funny.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about all the trouble that those sand snakes are going to get up into King's Landing. I realize now why I was confused before. I couldn't remember if it was Lady Nym or Tyene that went to King's Landing. It's both.
Mm-hmm.
Tyene's mixing in with the faith of the Seven, trying to get close to the High Septon, and Lady Nym is taking the seat on the council. So we'll talk about all that. We'll talk about Arianne. We'll talk about Quentyn's fallout. We'll talk about the brewing unrest in Dorne and the foreshadowing for, like I said, tragedy. So it's going to be a packed episode today, folks. Lots of information. Let's dive right in. So go ahead and give us the setup here, Quinn.
All right. So Dornish unrest is brewing since Prince Oberyn killed himself, basically. So they're kind of full of it for the most part, because like he died in a trial by combat, in my opinion. But that's neither here nor there. So Doran is actually finally starting to spring into action after like years of plotting and planning. His master plan, whatever it is finally, the pieces are finally starting to move. You've got Lady Nym and Tyene sent to King's Landing with 300 spears, as we mentioned earlier. Got Obara with Arya Hota going to catch Darkstar, who, of course, attacked Princess Marcella. And they're going to frame him they're framing him currently also for the death of the Kingsguard member, Aerys Oakheart, who was killed by Arya Hota. And then, of course, Arianne is going to fAegon, and they haven't heard anything about Quentyn, so there's some potential drama that could happen once they find out what exactly happened to Quentyn, or get like a whiff of what happened to Quentyn, because they won't know exactly what happened. They'll just know that he got roasted by a dragon. So that's the setup for what's happening in the Winds of Winter.
Yeah, in fact, a lot of the Dornish plot, as I read back over it in Feast and Dance and the two Arianne TWOW chapters. By the way, there will be TWOW spoilers, of course, as with all these videos. What struck me is that there's a lot of rumors going on. Like you mentioned, they're trying to figure out what's going on with Quentyn. And when they do hear, it might be mixed messages. And that's kind of running out through the whole thing. They're trying to figure out what's going on with the Golden Company. And even when Arianne is sent out to meet Jon Con, she doesn't know quite what's up yet at all, or if Dany's going to be there, or if Quentyn's there. So Doran's putting his plan into motion, like you said, but he just not sure. Like, he's waited a long time and he's going now, but it's not like the perfect moment necessarily. He's not sure about a lot of things. So,
and also the plan has been shaken up a little bit, right? Things have kind of been thrown off a little bit. He's had to adapt it because of the series already. And now he's wondering what's going on with Quentyn, like you said, and like, can the Sand Snakes really be trusted? And there's a lot of variables.
And then Arianne pulled her whole shenanigan in
his
Feast
own daughter.
And so let's talk about that brewing unrest in Dorne. Like we mentioned, the people in Sunspear are very upset about Oberyn's death. And as this is in Feast, as Doran Martell gets to Sunspear, we see that the people are basically almost ready to riot. And here's the quote. Prince Doran had closed the draperies of his litter as soon as Sunspear came into sight, yet still the small folk shouted out to him as the litter passed. The sand snakes have stirred them to a boil, the captain thought uneasily. And the captain is Arya Hotas. This is all his inner monologue. They crossed the squalor of the outer crescent and went through the second gate. Beyond, the wind stank of tar and salt and water and rotting seaweed, and the crowd grew thicker with every step. Make way for Prince Doran, Arya Hotah boomed out, thumping the butt of his long axe on the bricks. Make way for the Prince of Dorne. The prince is dead, a woman shrilled behind him. To spears, a man bellowed from a balcony. Doran, called some highborn voice. To the spears! Hotah gave up looking for the speakers. The press was too thick, and a third of them were shouting. To spears! Vengeance for the Viper! By the time they reached the third gate, the guards were shoving people aside to clear a path for the prince's litter, and the crowd was throwing things. One ragged boy darted past the spearman with a half-rotten pomegranate in one hand, but when he saw Arya Hotah in his path with long axe at the ready, he let the fruit fall unthrown and beat a quick retreat. Others farther back let fly with lemons, limes, and oranges, crying, "War, war," to the spears. You get the idea here. So they're pelting him with fruit, they're shouting. It's the very picture of unrest.
I love the dynamic of how the people of Dorne view Doran versus Oberyn. All right, so I've often said that if Tyrion and Cersei just worked together, they would make the perfect team. Because you got Cersei, who's like wildfire. She's the one that's crazy and wild. And you've got Tyrion, who's more tempered and cunning, coming up with all the schemes, right? And I feel like that's the dynamic that Oberyn and his brother Doran developed. You had Doran, who's cunning and quiet, but then you had Oberyn, who's kind of like more like openly, like the badass. He's the one that everyone admires and sees. But they work together and they kind of have like this cool team. But the people of Dorne only saw Oberyn because he's the one that stood out, right? I
was just going to say we have a perfect quote for that. It's a little bit later in the doc, but I'll just go ahead and read it now. It's about the snake and the grass, and it epitomizes just what you're talking about. So it says, this is Doran talking. I am not blind nor deaf. I know that you all believe me weak, frightened, feeble. Your father knew me better. Oberyn was ever the viper, deadly, dangerous, unpredictable. No man dared tread on him. I was the grass, pleasant, compliant, sweet-smelling, swaying with every breeze. Who fears to walk upon the grass? But it is the grass that hides the viper from his enemies and shelters him until he strikes. Your father and I worked more closely than you know, but now he is gone. The question is, can I trust his daughters to serve me in his place? So there's the whole relationship summed up pretty much.
So people aren't really necessarily recognizing what Doran is doing for Dorne, but they see that Oberyn was openly striving for the benefit of Dorne.
Yeah, and so it'll start to change a little bit now that Doran is moving into action and they're going to war, but it's just important to understand the political dynamic in Dorne that's sort of leading up to all this. So Obara Sand breaks it down in no uncertain terms to Doran at another point in the feast, and she says, thousands are crossing the sands afoot to climb the Boneway, so they may help Ilaria bring my father home. The septs are packed to bursting, and the red priests have lit their temple fires. In the pillow houses, women are coupling with every man who comes to them and refusing any coin. In Sunspear, on the Broken Arm, all along the Greenblood, in the mountains, out in the deep sand, everywhere, women tear their hair and men cry out in rage. The same question is heard on every tongue. What will Doran do? What will his brother do to avenge our murdered prince?
So again, Oberyn is seen as the true leader of Dorne, and they don't really see Doran in the same way. the prince is dead, as the other quote said. And you can see
Yeah,
that the people of Dorne are really mourning Oberyn's death. They really lost a figurehead. The
yeah.
Viper.
He epitomized like just everything about Dorne. Dorne is a hard place. It compares very well to the wildlings beyond the wall in that it's a hard land that breeds a hard people, like the Iron Islands. And so everybody's tough. You have to be tough to survive. And so for them, going to war is not as concerning. Like they're ready to fight and die, just like the Ironborn. Like they don't sweat dying. If they die in battle, it's to the glory of the drowned god, and so be it, kind of. So it's a little bit of that vibe with Dorne too. And that's actually what's interesting about Doran is that he contrasts with that. He's always thinking about the children. He's at the water gardens. He's trying to show Arianne the children and say, look, the kids are going to be the ones that suffer. So it's a very humanizing voice in the middle of all this, like, rabble, rabble, rabble.
Mm-hmm. Oberyn embodied more of the principles and ideals that were admired generally by the culture of Dorne, while as Doran didn't, but he still had traits that were necessary for someone that was in power.
Yeah, and Doran's pretty subtle too. There's some pretty nice moments when he draws out the second Kingsguard knight that comes down there and dance. Balin Swan, I believe it is.
Mm-hmm.
He helps suss out the plan to kill Trystane on the way home by sort of prying like, oh, what if we went by sea? And he's like, oh, that might be dangerous. And he's like, oh yeah, no biggie. No, we'll go by land. That's a better idea. But just by doing that, he confirmed that like, oh yeah, they don't want to go by sea. They do have an ambush plan. So Doran's pretty smart. And we'll just have to see if it's like smart or like too smart for his own good smart. But we'll get to that foreshadowing in a minute. Now, Doran's plans, as we all know, are overripe. And I noticed a sentence that's the first line of Captain of the Guards, which is Areo Hotah's first chapter. And it just says it all right here. It says, the blood oranges are well past ripe, the prince observed in a weary voice when the captain rolled him onto the terrace. After that, he did not speak again for hours. So it's just like this waiting, the silence. The fruit is so ripe, it's falling. It's the bleeding fruit. I mean, it couldn't be any more clear.
Well, yeah, and our next quote is tied directly into it, so let me go ahead and read it. Silence is a prince's friend. The captain had heard him tell his daughter once, words are like arrows, Arianne. Once loose, you cannot call them back. So, yeah, he's patient, and he would rather wait till the moment is exactly right than act too soon. Because he knows that once something is loose, once something is unleashed, it can't be taken back. It can't be put back in the box.
Yeah.
Once it's revealed, then it can't be put back in.
And that's true, and that's good advice. And there's a lot of people that would do well to heed that advice. At the same time, though, the perfect moment never comes, and so Doran ends up putting his plans into motion just when he has to. Like the whole Quentyn quest is very perilous and risky, but he has to because he hears about Daenerys out there, and he's like, oh, I got to find out what's up. So. All right. Well, anyways, enough about Doran. He's a little tedious sometimes. Feel bad for the guy with the gout, but he's a little tedious. So let's talk about Arianne. Yeah, she's way more exciting. And she is really one of the characters I am really looking forward to in Winds of Winter. How about you?
Yeah, Arianne is an awesome character. It's a shame that they cut her out of the show. She's super intriguing and interesting, just multi-layered and really smart, and she's witty, and she's outsmarted by her dad, but she's quite intelligent too.
Yeah, and when you read the her first chapters where she's seducing Ari Zokart and acting very foolish and like a spoiled princess a little bit, and very sexy, it almost seems she seems a little tropey. But I really like the character development that's happened after her plot has failed and she's spent the time in the tower, and then she's gained access to her father's plans, and now she has a second chance and she's more trusted and hopefully learn some lessons. She's now a very interesting character, so I can't wait to see where George takes her.
The Princess in the Tower is one of the best written chapters in the whole series, I think, because it mainly 99% of it takes place in one spot, but it's so well written that it just flies by, and you learn so much about Arianne as a character and who she is and what she wants out of life and like what she fears, and that she kind of resents her brother. You learn so much about her in that one chapter, and then it's really written well.
Yeah, I agree. As an aspiring writer, it's like one of those we should all go back and read and just study and kind of see what's going on there. So basically, I find it interesting that Arianne is one of the, we've gotten two Arianne two. That's four. Two. Yes, two Arianne chapters from Winds of Winter amongst the 8 or 9 or so that have been released. So it's definitely something that, early on in the book, it's the plot that's going to be developing. It might be one of those things where George wants to catch up to the action in King's Landing and stuff like that. So definitely look for a lot of Arianne action early in Winds. And as that first one starts off, she's basically been sent out to figure out what's up with the Golden Company. They don't know anything. They don't know, like, they've heard a little bit about Jon Con, and turns out they got a letter from Jon Con. We'll read that in a second. But they don't know if Daenerys is coming, if Quentyn has been successful, if they're all coming together. Originally, when they hear about the Golden Fleet, they think, oh, that must be Quentyn and Daenerys' fleet. So total chaos here. And so it says, send a raven whenever you have news, Prince Doran told her, but report only what you know to be true. We are lost in the fog here, besieged by rumors, falsehoods, and travelers' tales. I dare not act until I know for a certainty what is happening. So
they don't really know anything. They're just kind of twiddling their thumbs. That is, of course, until the letter that they get from Jon Con. To Prince Doran of House Martell, you will remember me, I pray. I knew your sister well, and I was a leal servant of your good brother. I grieve for them as you do. I did not die, no more than did your sister's son. To save his life, we kept him hidden, but the time for hiding is done. A dragon has returned to Westeros to claim his birthright and seek vengeance for his father and for the Princess Elia, his mother. In her name I turn to Dorne. Do not forsake us, Jon Connington, Lord of Griffin's Roost, hand of the true king. Arianne read the letter thrice, then rolled it up and tucked it back into her sleeve. A dragon has returned to Westeros, but not the dragon my father was expecting. Nowhere in the words was there a mention of Daenerys Stormborn, nor of Prince Quentyn, her brother, who had been sent to seek the Dragon Queen.
Yeah, so you can see, like, that letter doesn't have a lot of information. You can see that Jon Con is being stingy with his words. He's giving them just enough to arouse their interest, but not telling them a whole lot how many forces he has or what his plan is or anything. So interesting feeler that he put out there. And later it says, he comes with sellswords, but no dragons, Prince Doran had told her the night the Raven came. The Golden Company is the best and largest of the free companies, but 10,000 mercenaries cannot hope to win the 7 kingdoms. So I guess Doran has a rough idea of, like, what the Golden Company has then, because, he's smart. Elia's son, I would weep for joy if some part of my sister had survived, but what proof do we have that this is Aegon? His voice broke when he said that. Where are the dragons, he asked. Where is Daenerys? And Arianne knew he was really saying, where is my son? So lots of doubt. It's one of the most up in the air things. Like, will Arianne choose to ally with fAegon or not? She may or she may not. She has reason to doubt. She has reason to be attracted to the handsome dragon boy, kind of Darkstar-ish. We'll talk about that. But
then, of course, I think that once they figure out the fate of Quentyn, that it will play heavily into who they choose to join, I think.
Yes, it may well. And so last part of this setup is that it says, in the Boneway and the Prince's Pass, 2 Dornish hosts had massed, and there they sat, sharpening their spears, polishing their armor, dicing, drinking, quarreling, their numbers dwindling by the day, waiting for the Prince of Dorne to loose them on the enemies of House Martell, waiting for the dragons, for fire and blood. For me, Mrs. Arianne thinking, one word from Arianne and those armies would march, so long as that word was dragon. If instead the word she sent was war, Lord Ironwood and Lord Fowler and their armies would remain in place. The Prince of Dorne was nothing if not subtle. Here, war meant wait. So you can see, like, the pressure is on Arianne. She's like in her early 20s. She's sent with a small crew, figure out what's going on with this really wild situation. And there's an army, like a taut bowstring, ready to fire at her command. She's got to make the call. So that's a lot of trust.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a lot of pressure. And it's like a theme that you see kind of in this series over and over again, which is like tremendous decisions being put on the backs of really, really young people. And sometimes they don't always make the right decisions. Sometimes they make disastrous decisions. So we'll see how it turns out with Arianne. I think she's smart. So I think she'll probably figure something out.
So yeah, and along the lines of has she learned her lessons from the last book? There's a quote here about pretty boys and how Darkstar fooled her by being handsome. She thinks pretty boys had ever been her weakness, particularly the ones who were dark and dangerous as well. That was before, when I was just a girl, she told herself. I am a woman now, my father's daughter. I have learned that lesson. So hopefully, but maybe this is like a lot of self-talk that, because fAegon is handsome and he is kind of bold and reckless. And so she's talking to Omar, who, by the way, is that one member of the free company that looks Valerian because he's from Lys or Lys or whatever, however you say that. But it says his eyes were a pale lilac. His hair was a waterfall of white and gold. All the same, something about him made her skin crawl. Was this what Viserys looked like? Because she's sort of like thinking about what Targaryens are like as this whole scene is playing out. She found herself wondering, if so, perhaps it's a good thing he is dead. So she didn't have to marry him. And then she's grossed out. And then she asks, after Lyson Mar says, oh yeah, Targaryen women they're so pretty. She asks about the men. And he says, oh, even prettier. Though if truth be told, I've only seen the one, which is fAegon. So fAegon is pretty. He's a pretty man.
I guess. Okay. All right. So last we heard, Arianne is at Griffin's Roost about to take ship to Storm's Inn, which fAegon currently holds. The Tyrell army is headed to attack Storm's Inn. And Arianne is supposed to get there first. So she'll get there directly before the Tyrell army attacks. So she'll be there when it attacks, presumably.
That's right. So she's going to get there, right before the army. And she's worried about being caught in a siege. But Halden Halfmaester says, oh no, King fAegon is not going to, take that. He plans on taking the attack to the enemy. And so it's set up to be very combustible. This is one of the little things that we've gotten from the Winds of Winter is that fAegon has successfully taken Storm's End. We have no idea how he did it. There's hints that there was guile used, but I'm sure we'll see that at some point. But the last that we heard, it's already been taken, and Arianne is now getting on a boat to go there.
So Daemon Sand advises Arianne not to go to meet up with fAegon and Jon Connington because there's no Daenerys. They don't got dragons. They got Quentyn. But Arianne wants to meet Jon Connington, and she thinks that they will take her there anyway.
Right. She thinks to herself, if I refuse, they may not give me the choice. And so then I'll look weak. And she's like, best to just go along and, look tough or whatever. Not like a prisoner.
Yeah.
So, and there's this great line about, she thinks about the risk and she acknowledges the risk to Daemon. She does a pretty good job of being level-headed about it. She's like, I know it's risky, but, I'm Arianne Martell. This is what I got to do. I'm going to go beard the dragon in his den. So we'll see. But the other thing that's running in this chapter, Quinn, is that there are hints that Arianne is a little bit jealous of Quentyn and the idea of King Quentyn and Queen Daenerys and her being sort of, minimized out of that. And before that, she thought that Quentyn was going to steal her birthright to Dorne. And so there is this idea that maybe she's going to evaluate fAegon on her own and see a chance to forge an alliance that will be good for Arianne. So I'd keep my eye on that too.
Yeah, well, she's kind of resentful of Quentyn because she is the heir to Dorne. And first, like you said, she thought that they were going to steal her birthright to Dorne. But now she feels minimized because her brother could potentially be king of Westeros. So if she saw the opportunity to make herself queen, to empower herself by getting together with fAegon, she would potentially do that.
Right. And she wouldn't be turning against her father. She'd be like, look, I don't know where Daenerys is, but this fAegon guy is winning all the battles and he's about to take King's Landing. So I figured, let's get on the winning train. And I mean, we're engaged now. Isn't that good? So, I mean, it's, that's kind of, I think something like that is going to happen. That's my guess. All right. So next, let's talk about the sand snakes. I thought it was worth taking a minute to just sort of going over each one and kind of creating them as separate people in our minds. Because here we have to mention the show. Obviously, Dorne was a total train wreck in the show. The Sand Snakes were very bad. They did not have any developed personalities, and they're a little more interesting in the books. They haven't really done anything yet. It's still a lot of setup, but they do have distinct personalities. So we're going to go over each one and talk about what they are like so that we can start to figure out what they might do, because they've all gone, different places now in King's Landing and other places around. So there's a passage here where Areo-Hotah has a quick physical description summary of all of them. I'll just read that. It says, Hotah studied each of them in turn. Obara, rusted nails and boiled leather, with her angry close-set eyes and wrapped brown hair. Nymeria, that's Lady Nym, languid, elegant, olive-skinned, her long black braid bound up in a red gold wire. Tyene, blue-eyed and blonde, a child woman with soft hands and little giggles. And boy, is that a deceptive description. But she's the blonde one. I guess that's the thing. So we've got hard-ass MFer warrior lady. That's Obara. The femme fatale sexy knife lady. That's Lady Nym. And then the septa / poison master lady, which is Tyene. And we'll talk about that.
Yeah, it's cool. They're all distinct. They've all got their different skills. They've all got distinct personalities, which I appreciate. George R. Martin's really good at making distinct characters. And like you said, totally night and day from the show one-dimensional, soulless characters that showed up in Game of Thrones.
Yeah, we promised we wouldn't go there too much, but it does have to be said that this is a major difference, and that's kind of what we're doing with these videos, is just trying to reorient towards the books, sort of wash out the show canon and figure out, retrain our thoughts on what's going to happen next. So let's talk about Obara first. It's actually this one chapter of Areo-Hotah's where all 3 sand snakes are introduced in sequence. And first they're at the water gardens and they're just chilling. Doran is chilling. It's very peaceful. The oranges are plopping on the pavement and the breeze is blowing and the children are swimming. And then Obara's steps are like, did you change it to Obama to try to screw me up, or did I type Obama?
You definitely typed Obama. That was not me.
Obama Sand. Yeah, no, Obara Sand. That's a good one. So her steps are like a drumbeat walking up, right? And says, Obara, he knew her stride, long-legged, hasty, angry. In the stables by the gates, her horse would be lathered and bloody from her spurs. She always rode stallions and had been heard to boast that she could master any horse in Dorne, and any man as well. Obara Sand always walked too fast. She is chasing after something she can never catch, the prince had told his daughter once in the captain's hearing.
Obara's got a warrior spirit. That's for sure.
Yeah, she actually wants to, Areo-Hotah is very worried about whether or not Obara is going to provoke a fight, and he's gripping his axe and getting tense about it as she's walking. Of course, Areo-Hotah thinks about killing people pretty much all the time, but whatever.
Yeah. So here's another funny quote about Obara. Her face had been stone before he spoke, but then it hardened. So she's already got a stone face, and then it gets even harder. So I wonder what that's like. So it says here, Obara was the eldest sand snake, a big-boned woman near to 30. So she's big-boned and strong, almost like a maybe Brienne type character. Probably not as big and imposing as Brienne, but almost in that vein of character. So
yeah, she's not dainty.
No. Yeah, so she's really hard. They say she wear the riding leathers that she wore were the softest things about her, and she carries a whip and a steel shield and a spear. So she's a total badass warrior woman. Don't mess with her.
And strong, physically strong, the spear and shield fighting style. It takes a lot of strength. That's the same that Oberyn used. So, Lady Nym is good with knives. She's a warrior as well, but Obara is physically, imposing. So that's kind of the difference there. Obara's origin story is super mean. It's one of those ones where it's a whole short story in a paragraph. It says, "The day my father came to claim me, my mother did not wish for me to go. She is a girl," she said, "and I do not think that she is yours. I had 1,000 other men." He tossed his spear at my feet and gave my mother the back of his hand across the face. So she began to weep. "Girl or boy, we fight our battles," he said, "but the gods let us choose our weapons." He pointed to the spear and then to my mother's tears, and I picked up the spear. "I told you she was mine," my father said, and took me. My mother drank herself to death within the year. They say that she was weeping as she died. Obara edged closer to the prince in his chair. "Let me use the spear. I ask no more." So.
All right. So that's a terrible story.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah.
Yeah. So her dad takes her from her mother, and then her mother dies. She's cries herself to death.
Yeah, it's just merciless. And that's kind of the thing that you get with Obara, is that she doesn't have mercy. She's hard. She comes from a rough upbringing. If people aren't going to cry for her, she's not going to cry for anybody else, I guess is the point.
Mm-hmm. And she, of course, wants to go to war, right? She wants to avenge her father, and she feels like they have the means to do so. She just wants Doran to grant her permission to do it.
Yeah, and the funny thing is that she has this idea about attacking Old Town, like just out of nowhere. She's like, yeah, let's go there. And then Doran's like, how could you hope to hold it? He's like, it'd be enough to sack it, the wealth there. And he's like, is it gold you want? And she's like, it's blood I want. And then there's this great line. She says, I'd get more pleasure from driving my spear into Lord Tywin's belly. I'd make him sing the Rains of Castamere as I pull his bowels out and look for gold. I just love that. So anyways, that's Obara.
All right. So next up, we got Lady Nym. So here's the quote where Lady Nym first appears, and it's really cool. She appeared suddenly upon a dune, mounted on a golden sand steed with a mane like fine white silk. Even a horse, the Lady Nym looked graceful, dressed in shimmering lilac robes and a great silk cape of cream and copper that lifted at every gust of wind, and maid was 25 and slender as a willow. Her straight black hair, worn in a long braid bound up with red gold wire, made a widow's peak above her dark eyes, just as her father's had. With her high cheekbones, full lips, and milk-pale skin, she had all the beauty that her elder sister lacked. Nym was born from the noblest blood of Volantis. A dozen mounted spearmen tailed her, their round shields glimmering in the sun. So I really like this. She appears on a dune. It reminds me of a scene from Dune a little bit. It's super interesting. It's good to be reminded that Doran is a desert. Seeing this, because like we said, we weren't going to mention the show, but yeah, it's so crazy how like in all the times they've shown Doran in the show, it never really looks like it's a giant desert, and that's exactly what Doran is. You only ever really see the water gardens, and when it's outside, you see grass a lot. So it's cool here to see sand dunes, and it's a desert. It's dry and it's hot and it's shimmering. I like it.
And then Lady Nym with the silk, the lilac and cream and orange, the gold silk. Yeah, it's pretty dramatic, and she's different than Obara, but at the core, she's really not. She wants blood too. Her plan's just a little more subtle. So it says, I was abed with the Fowler twins when word reached me, the captain heard her say. You know the Fowler words. Let me soar. That is all I ask of you. Let me soar, uncle. I need no mighty host, only one sweet sister. Obara? Tyene. Obara is too loud. Tyene is so sweet and gentle that no man will suspect her. Obara would make Old Town our father's funeral pyre, but I am not so greedy. 4 lives will suffice for me. Lord Tywin's golden twins as payment for Elia's children, the old lion for Elia herself, and last of all, the little king for my father. And then it goes on and says, the playful tone had vanished from her voice, and the captain found himself watching through narrowed eyes. So once again, Arya Hota gripping the axe, thinking about killing people. And it says, her sister Obara wore the whip upon her hip and carried a spear where any man could see it. Lady Nym was no less deadly, though she kept her knives well hidden. And later it says she was sure to have a dozen blades concealed about her person. So she really is Knife Lady.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, she's Bene Gesserit as well. So yeah, she's subtle with her deadliness. She doesn't let you know right off the bat. So while Obara wears her, you look at Obara immediately, this is a deadly woman. She's dangerous. I'm going to stay away from her. But Lady Nym, she invites you in, maybe with a little bit of this Bene Gesserit seduction, lures you in, and then you got a knife to your throat. So I really like that.
Yeah, you kind of get the feeling like she's going to fit right in King's Landing, isn't she?
Exactly.
And it slid right by real quick, but she was in bed with the Fowler twins when she got word. So just getting down like that. And then there's another line where she says, my sisters and I shall not wait 10 and 7 years for our vengeance. So she's sweet, but she's definitely tough and steely as well. Now, Tyene, that is the Septa, and she might be my favorite. She waits for Doran at the top of the Tower of the Sun. And it says, she was sitting cross-legged on a pillow beneath the raised dais where the high seat stood, but she rose as they entered, dressed in a clinging gown of pale blue samite, her arm clad in the purest shimmering samite. Okay, no Monty Python. Blue samite with sleeves of Mirish lace that made her look as innocent as the maid herself. In one hand was a piece of embroidery she had been working on, and in the other a pair of golden needles. Her hair was gold as well. Her eyes were deep blue pools, and yet somehow they reminded the captain of her father's eyes, though Oberyn's had been as black as night. All of Prince Oberyn's daughters have viper eyes, Hotah realized suddenly. The color does not matter. And what she was embroidering was a cushion with a picture of the red viper, and she gives it to Doran and kind of very insinuatingly says, it's so you won't forget him, you know.
Yeah, all of them have his viper's eyes, so there's like an underlying deadliness. There's a snake waiting to strike in all of them. Interesting.
Yeah, definitely a cool poetic line. And Tyene is full of sweet voice and murderous words. She very gently says to Doran, "Oh, does it hurt so much?" Her voice was gentle, sweet as summer strawberries. Her mother had been a septa, and Tyene had an air of almost otherworldly innocence about her. But then a second later, she says, someone says to her, "Lord Tywin has promised us the mountain's head." And she says, "He is so kind, but a headsman's sword is no fit end for brave Sir Gregor. We have prayed so long for his death, it is only fair that he pray for it as well. I know the poison that my father used, and there is none slower or more agonizing. Soon we may hear the mountain screaming, even here in Sunspear." So, very menacing, very creepy. And Prince Doran says, "Obara cries for war, Nym wants murder, what do you want?" And she says, "Oh yes, war, but not my sister's war. The Dornishmen fight best at home." So she wants to draw the Lannisters and Tyrells into Dorne, and her idea for doing that is crowning Myrcella. And this is back before Arianne has already tried to do this, of course. But she's like, let's crown Myrcella, declare her the rightful queen, and just wait for the Lannisters to come and then bleed them in the passes. That's her idea. So she wants blood as well. She's a septa. but
she still wants to murder. She's a septa with a taste for murder.
And poison, apparently. That's her whole thing. There's lines about her hands being deadly, and about how she knows which poison that her father used. And she says about Tywin, if I had had him, his dying would not have been so easy. So, yeah. And then just a couple other loose ends. Of course, there's Alaris the Sphinx in Old Town. That's really Sorella Sand. She's a sand snake as well. And then there's Elia Sand, who is sort of the reckless young girl that's sent with Arianne into the Rainwood in those chapters. So there you go. That's the sand snakes.
Mm-hmm.
And our next section is about Doran and Oberyn, Doran and Oberyn. We already talked about the snake in the grass. And there's a quote here about Doran having a history of not being able to control his snakes. Why don't you read that one?
"He went beyond anything I asked of him. Take the measure of this boy king and his council and make note of their strengths and weaknesses, I told him on the terrace. We were eating oranges. Find us friends, if there are any to be found. Learn of what you can of Elia's inn. But see that you do not provoke Lord Tywin unduly. Those were my words to him." Oberyn laughed and said, "When have I provoked any man unduly? You would do better to warn the Lannisters against provoking me. He wanted justice for Elia, but he would not wait." Clearly, Doran, like you said, has a history of not being able to control Oberyn, so it makes sense that he wouldn't necessarily be able to control Oberyn's daughters either.
And yet he has no choice but to make them swear on their father's bones and then send them out and hope they do the right thing. And the same for Arianne too. So
it makes sense why he's kind of anxious about it and a little bit nervous about the whole thing.
Yeah, and there's a big age gap actually here. Doran is, nearly a man grown, or fully a man grown actually, by the time that Elia and Oberyn are children. So, Oberyn is very much like a much younger brother and almost like not a child, but you know how it is when you're an older brother and you have a younger sibling.
Yeah.
It's a little bit of a parental,
Yeah, Doran is more like a father figure. And then also, in the same way that he's like a father figure, Oberyn kind of looks at him like, yeah, what do you really know? I'll do what I want, old man. Just a little bit.
Yep. So yeah, now now Doran's even older and he's sending everybody out and just hoping for the best. So here, the next thing we've got to talk about is the fallout from Quentyn's death. As we mentioned, this is going to be a big thing that we haven't seen yet. Even in the second chapter, Arianne has not even heard any rumors of Quentyn's death or anything. So this is completely yet to drop. And back in Slaver's Bay, we have essentially Garrus Drinkwater and Archibald Ironwood, who survived the attempt to capture the dragons. Quentyn did not survive. They're in jail, and Barristan comes to them, and he has a deal, and he's talking to them, and he's trying to get them essentially to do something for him. And this is really funny because Drinkwater starts giving this speech about how what Quentyn did, he did for the love of Queen Daenerys, to prove himself worthy of her hand. And it says, the old knight had heard enough. What Prince Quentyn did, he did for Dorne. Do you take me for some doting grandfather? I've spent my life around kings and queens and princes. Sunspear means to take up arms against the Iron Throne. No, do not trouble to deny it. Doran Martell is not a man to call his spears without hope of victory. Duty brought Prince Quentyn here. Duty, honor, thirst for glory, never love. Quentyn was here for dragons, not Daenerys. And he tries to speak up again, and Ironwood agrees. He's like, he's dead, Drink. Words won't fetch him back. Cletus and Will are dead too, so shut your bloody mouth before I stick my fist in it. The big knight turned to Selmy. What do you mean to do with us?
So, yeah, that's why I love Barristan Selmy. He's like, don't BS me. He didn't do anything for Daenerys. He did it for Dorne. Yeah.
I might be old, but don't give me any of that bullshit.
So, and then what is the plan that Barristan has for them?
So Barristan wants them to merge with the other Windblown and the dungeons, who Barristan is going to send back to the Tattered Prince.
Right, and he's going to have essentially Drink and Arch offer the Tattered Prince Pentos, which is what he wanted from Quentyn, in exchange for rescuing the hostages, who are Dario, Jogo, her Blood Rider, and Hero, one of the Unsullied.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll see how that goes. But assuming they do that, then the deal is they're going to be able to carry Quentyn's bones back to Dorne, and everything will be fine, I'm sure.
Yep. Well, probably.
Thanks for the bone. They might not. Do you think they'll even make it back?
His bones back to Dorne?
I mean, no. Drink and Arch there.
Oh, perhaps they might, just to be like, oh, the news is terrible. But I don't know. There's a lot of things that could potentially take them out on the way back. It's a long way from Slaver's Bay to Dorne. So,
yeah, I almost wonder if the rumor might get there first, anyways. You know.
Yeah, exactly. So, you don't necessarily need them to appear before Dorne or one of the characters and say, "Oh, Quentyn got roasted by a dragon," because it's, people will know about it inevitably. And I guess the story will obviously get twisted. So, right, that's why it could potentially lead to some hard feelings for the Dorners towards Daenerys, because as the story becomes Daenerys killed Quentyn, then it's like, oh, when there's already rumors that she does stuff like that she's, feeding children to her dragons and doing all this stuff, they wouldn't think anything of her potentially, killing this Dornish prince that's coming over and maybe like insisting certain things, or just because she feels like it. They don't really know who she is. And like they say earlier, there's a quote somewhere where someone says, well, she is the Mad Queen's daughter. Like that's
that's actually the one I have queued up right here. So there's distrust of Dany already starting. And this is basically Arianne talking to Sir Daemon Sand. And she says, they're talking about Viserys. Why did Daenerys let it happen? Viserys was her brother, all that remained of her own blood. The Dothraki are savage folk. Who can know why they kill? Perhaps Viserys wiped his arse with the wrong hand. Perhaps, thought Arianne, or perhaps Daenerys realized that once her brother was crowned and wed to me, she would be doomed to spend the rest of her life sleeping in a tent and smelling like a horse. She is the Mad King's daughter, the princess said. How do we know? We cannot know, Sir Daemon said. We can only hope.
Yeah, they don't know anything about Daenerys. They just know the stories that they've heard and what they've been told. Because, of course, without knowing what type of person Viserys was and how he abused Daenerys, they're not going to have the context of knowing that he was a horrible person. He did all these things that completely disrespected Dothraki culture. They don't know that. They just know that he was one of the last Targaryens and Dany's brother, and she allowed him to be killed. So,
yep. Man, it feels like we're on Twitter.
Yeah.
Dany's going to go psycho because she lived with... Okay, yes. Anyways. Yes. George foresaw the arguments that would arise, I guess, in the fandom. All right. So our last section in this very long Dornish episode, and man, there was a lot more here than I thought there was. This could have been like 3 episodes, but there you go. It's the Dornish multi-pack hour. Is ominous foreshadowing. There's a lot of ominous foreshadowing and a sense of impending tragedy coming. And God, these quotes are just, well, we'll just go through them and you can, judge for yourself. So first of all, very conspicuous are the defensive measures of Sunspear. When Doran arrives, they talk about the threefold gate and how you can only pass through when all 3 gates are open. Otherwise, you have to wind all around this warren of mazes and stuff. So I don't know, could be innocent world building, or it could be George like pointing out stuff that's going to be involved in a battle later, All
right, so the Shadow City is particularly vulnerable because you have Sunspear, the fortress, and then just the city outside of that. With no walls, there's really no defenses. So it's kind of prime for attack. It's vulnerable.
Yeah, definitely a Dornish tragedy in the making there, potentially. An interesting thing about Sunspear is that it's never attacked. And all the times that the Targaryens, when they were trying to conquer Dorne, they burned almost all of Dorne, but they did not ever attack Sunspear. And that even led some people to wonder if there's a little conspiracy going with the Martells, allowing the rest of Dorne to be sacrificed so they'd come out on top. But conspiracy hour aside, we have not seen Sunspear ever attacked in history. And so it just kind of makes me wonder if it's going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
So there's the famous Nymeria Sand speech, which is worthy of its own podcast almost. Just the difference between the violent, bloodthirsty Nymeria Sand character on the show that made no sense at all versus the very tragic character in the books who is sort of the voice of reason, talking about the bloodshed of the war. And you guys remember the first half of it. She says, God's forbid, I would that were a finish. Because Obara is looking at the skull of Gregor like, oh, it's a good start. And she's like, oh, I wish it were a finish. Tywin Lannister is dead. So is Robert Baratheon, Amory Lorch, and now Gregor Clegane, all those who had a hand in murdering Elia and her children. Even Joffrey, who was not yet born when Elia died. I saw the boy perish with my own eyes, clawing at his throat as he tried to draw a breath. Who else is there to kill? Do Myrcella and Tama need to die so the shades of Rhaenys and Aegon can be at rest? Where does it end? It ends in blood as it began, said Lady Nym. It ends when Casterly Rock is cracked open so the sun can shine on the maggots and the worms within. It ends with the utter ruin of Tywin Lannister and all his works.
So yeah, exactly. Viper's eyes, all of the Viper's. Oh, come on.
You can leave that in. That's cute puppy noises are okay.
So all of the Viper's daughters have his Viper's eyes. And it's curious here to see Nymeria Sand be the complete and total opposite of the show version, where in the show version, she has a direct hand in the rebellion and the assassination of Doran Martell. Here, she is, let's calm down about this. No more bloodshed. Where does it end? Apparently in blood.
In blood. You and an audience, you're just going to have to put up with the cute puppy noises mixed with all this really bloody foreshadowing. It's a little bit of cognitive dissonance that, oh, isn't it cute? But, we're trying to just make the dark foreshadowing a little easier on you guys. That's the strategy here. So then there's Doran's famous Heart's Desire speech. This is the last Dornish chapter in Feast. This is the last paragraph of the chapter. Very dramatic, so I'll just read it here in my best dramatic reading voice. Her father plucked up a Cyvasse piece. I must know how you learned that Quentyn was abroad. Your brother went with Cletus Ironwood, Maester Kedry, 3 of the Lord Ironwood's best young knights on a long and perilous voyage with an uncertain welcome at its end. He has gone to bring us back our heart's desire. She narrowed her eyes. What is our heart's desire? Vengeance. His voice was soft, as if he were afraid that someone might be listening. Justice. Prince Doran pressed the onyx dragon into her palm with his swollen, gouty fingers and whispered, fire and blood.
Yes, that's one of the most epic lines from A Feast for Crows and the whole series in general. I love that. That's one of the best endings to a chapter that I've ever read in any book ever, honestly. I love it.
Yeah, and I was wondering if it's like specific to her because of the dragon piece, like it's pressed into her hand. So, for example, in Winds of Winter chapter, she's playing Cyvasse, and it says Arianne played a game of Cyvasse with Sir Daemon and another with Garibald Shells, and somehow managed to lose both. Sir Garibald was kind enough to say that she played a gallant game, but Daemon mocked her. You have other pieces beside the dragon, princess. Try moving them sometime. I like the dragon, she says.
And we've talked before, like in Tyrion chapters, about how Saivas being metaphors for what's actually going on with the players in the Game of Thrones and the game of the Song of Ice and Fire that's going on in real time.
Right. Tyrion's playing with the white dragon piece. fAegon's flipping over the board. Maybe a clue that you picked up on, that he's going to upend the board in a way we don't expect. And so here's Arianne's like, oh, I like the dragon. So we'll see how that works. Maybe she'll fare better than Quentyn. Maybe not. One thing I noticed is that all through the Quentyn chapter, he's thinking the phrase fire and blood. What am I here for? Fire and blood. There's even this line where he's like, the blood is pooling on the floor beneath my boots. The fire's behind the door. Oh shit, I'm scared. Like, yeah, this is what it's about. So then here we go, flashback to Doran, and what do they want? They want fire and blood. It's like, well, it might turn out the same as Quentyn.
Yeah, they might want it, but can they handle it? Maybe not. It might not come in the way they hope.
No, it's Arianne thinks to herself, war is happening, and this time Doran will not be spared. And doom and death are coming. Nymeria Sand had warned them before she took her own leave from Prince Doran. It is time for my little snakes to scatter, the best to survive the carnage. And then there's a line about the younger sand snakes going to various places, the water gardens, Sunspear, another one goes to a different castle. And yeah, so poor Nymeria, she sees more bloodshed coming. She's worried about her children. And yeah, probably with good reason.
Poor, totally different Ilaria from the show. I mean, I just can't emphasize it enough. So yeah, things aren't looking good. There's a lot of foreshadowing of very dark things to come. It doesn't seem like things are necessarily going to turn out well for the Dornish people.
Yeah, and it could be just that they have to pay a heavy price to get their justice, and maybe they'll be left with the vengeance that they asked for, but it'll just be the like, well, how's it feel? Not very good, but or it could just be a total tragedy. But like, for example, okay, so everyone knows by now that Tiora Toland line about having the dreams of dragons, and everywhere the dragons danced, the people died. The thing is, that line is given to Arianne, and it's given to Arianne right after she says, once we know beyond a doubt whether these be friends or foe, talking about Jon Con and fAegon, my father will know what to do, the princess said. It was then that pasty pudgy Tiora raised her eyes from the cream cakes on her plate. It is dragons. Dragons, said her mother. Tiora, don't be mad. I'm not. They're coming. So it's specifically dragons coming to Westeros. There's going to be a dance of the dragons, Dany and fAegon or whatever, and people are going to die, and Arianne and House Martell are going to be right in the middle of it. And that's probably the best summary of everything that's going on with House Martell.
And there's a lot going on with House Martell, even setting all of this up. We can't really make this necessarily a short video because there's so much going on. And there's even so much here that we couldn't go over or discuss because the Dornish plot in the show is such a multifaceted plot line and involving several different narratives and involving all these different characters, and all these different characters from other plot points intersect with the Dornish plot line. So it's immensely complicated and it's a lot to talk about.
Yeah, you said in the show, but you meant in the book because you're thinking as opposed to the show. But yeah, we all know which one has the complicated Dornish plot and which one had Jaime and Bronn brewing it up in that one little cool
Xena Warrior Princess, spin-off version.
Oh yeah. I also didn't appreciate the overly violent, misogynistic end they gave to the Sand Snakes at Euron's hand. I thought that was like way over the top and ugly and distasteful. But
see, at the time I was being a douchebag, so I was like, yeah, I like it, kill them. But yeah, going back and look at it, it was totally gratuitous, and it's just like it was them just being like, we messed up so bad with this, and let's kind of go crazy in the opposite direction. They gave them all really messed up deaths, honestly.
Yeah. So I think there will be tragedy, obviously, with Doran, as we've said, but it'll be poetic and interesting. And like I said, Arianne is a really interesting character now that she's sort of taken a fall and gotten back up and maybe learned a little bit, lost her father's trust, regained her father's trust. Now she's in this position of having to make decisions, and she's keeping her dad updated with the Ravens, but she can't ask for advice before she has to decide. She just has to make these calls, and she's about to make some really big decisions. So
and she'll have to depend on her wits and everything that she's learned so far. And I'm looking forward to it.
So bonus question, almost forgot. what do you think will happen with Obara Sand and Arya Ota being sent to High Hermitage to, quote, beard Darkstar in his den? How do you think that's going to shake out?
I think they're going to mess him up.
You
But,
think?
I mean, I think he'll put up a fight. I think Darkstar is cunning and clever. He's got some secrets under his, under his cape, whatever. But ultimately, I can't wait to see this team up between Obara and Arya Ota and see them take him down ultimately. But we will see.
So I don't think I'm on Team Darkstar. Not that I'm rooting for the guy, but I think Darkstar is going to steal Dawn and make his way into fAegon's Kingsguard. So I don't think he's going to die here. He might defeat those two, or maybe he'll co-opt them and he'll have political information that will turn the tables. Maybe Arya Ota will die and then he'll work with Obara and they'll come to a new understanding. I think Arya is certain to die. And that should be a good fight too. Yeah, looking forward to that. So
yeah.
All right, guys. Well, that's been an action-packed almost an hour or so, or whatever it turns out to be after we edit this down. So thanks very much for tuning in. I'm LML.
And I'm Quinn from Quinn's Ideas. Make sure you like and subscribe to both of our channels. Links in the description.
And we'll see you tomorrow with another most anticipated plotline. Peace.
Over the next 23 days, starting right now, we'll be releasing videos alternating between both of our channels, covering all of the awesome stuff that's coming in A Song of Ice and Fire, book number 6, from Jon Snow's Resurrection to Euron Greyjoy's Apotheosis. So make sure you subscribe to both of our channels so you don't miss anything, and those links will be in the description, of course.